Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. I had the honor of having a discussion, which I want to share with you guys, with Greg Allard, who is the founder and leader of the Toronto chapter of the Pink Pistols. If you're not familiar with the Pink Pistols, they are an LGBT organization that focuses on firearm training, firearm advocacy, self-defense advocacy, that sort of thing. He's going to explain it in the interview, and he's going to do a better job than I just did. In this interview, I describe it as my first interview, which some people might say, wait a minute, I've seen other interviews that you've done. So how is this your first interview? This is actually the first one I recorded. We ended up having such a good time talking that the interview was several hours in length, and it needed some editing to bring it down to a digestible size. I'm not very good at editing. I'm still figuring that out, so that took a while. However, in the intervening time, something happened that I thought I'd share with you guys, and that is that I got a piece of particularly noxious hate mail. This hate mail accused me of being a supporter of the Pink Pistols, and it included all sorts of really ugly homophobic ranting. Of course, it was sent anonymously, so I don't know who sent it. If it was you, you can go ahead and hit the unsubscribe button. Everyone else, subscribe if you want to see more content, but I don't really need that sort of thing in my life, and I don't think the community needs that sort of people. It really illustrates the need for groups like the Pink Pistols, because even within the firearm community, there's people who are willing to throw firearm advocates under the bus because of those prejudices. So I just want to make it clear, yeah, I do support the Pink Pistols, and I support armed equality, and I support other similar groups, because this sort of thing is important. So I wanted to sort of give that context here as sort of an introduction, and I think that's probably sufficient introduction. We'll dive in. So without further ado, jumping to the interview.
I think they were around for 3 years, but unsurprisingly, in BC, there is a lot of NDP Liberal Party support, especially if you're in some of the cities. And for them, it just became, there just wasn't enough people in the community to support the chapter, and they eventually, lack of support, lack of volunteers, lack of interest, they folded. It's what it is. They couldn't get enough people to keep the chapter running.
So I know we've got C21 coming up and so forth. How do you expect that's going to affect your group? I know you're in Toronto, which is likely to be the target of one of these handgun bans if this goes through. Especially, it seems, for the LGBT community, typically people gravitate to cities, and you know it's going to be difficult if people are forced to make tough choices like that. It's so
I'm wondering how this proposed law is even remotely constitutional, because you have a right to live anywhere in Canada. So effectively, what this basically says is that, what they're basically saying is that members of an identifiable group of law-abiding citizens, because this law does not affect criminals. If you're a gangbanger and you're caught with a pistol under this law, and Toronto has banned handguns, you don't get an additional charge. It cannot affect you if you're a criminal. The way I've seen the law just interpreted as it was written.
Yeah. Well,
so,
yeah, you're 100% correct on that. The way they've decided to get around the constitutional division of powers issues is by putting it as a condition on licenses. So no license, no law.
So you can't live somewhere if you have this license. Let's say I get invited out to Mississauga, to Silverdale, or to East Eglinton, which, if you are LGBT on the far side of Toronto, hit up East Eglinton if you've never fired a gun. I tried running it. It failed on, it just, logistics of getting people out there kind of failed. But they are 100% open and welcoming. Like, the president out there was fantastic to work with, and eventually I'm going to try and set something up again. This beer flu that everyone's dealing with has kind of made certain things hard. But if I decide to go out to a range on the far side of Toronto, or someone comes out, let's say I ran Canyons for a day, and I have people coming from the far side of Toronto, and they're traveling along the 401, can they be arrested? Handguns are banned in the city of Toronto. If they're safe as long as they're on the 401, what happens if they get a flat? What happens if they run out of gas in the city?
One thing I also wanted to ask about is, I know there's the usual argument about, self-defense. People say, oh, well, the government is there to protect you. The police will do that. How do you feel that the government and the police have been in protecting particularly the LGBT community in the past?
I was working as a volunteer doorman at the local LGBT club, Club 717, and a gentleman interrupts a conversation, puts his hand out and says, I really need to shake your hand. And I'm like, okay. And he says, I heard you berating Bill Blair. I don't agree with what you said or what you believe fully, but more young people in our community need to hate that man. And I'm like, okay, I already hate him, but I want to hear your reasons. It turns out he was on his way to one of the venues that was raided the night February 5th, 1981, when Bill Blair and a bunch of members of the MTPS, Metro Toronto Police Service, decided to raid private venues under the guise that they were public places. Because the word public place in the law was exceptionally vague. And so, according to the NTPS, in a ruling that was completely thrown out, they tried to declare that a private club that you could only be a member or invited in after paying a fee were a public place, as public as the sidewalk on Main Street.
Now, I'm just kind of wondering how do the Pink Pistols relate to the larger firearm community? It's how do you guys sort of interact with or get along with the local gun clubs?
Well, internally, being a moderator or an organizer, it's kind of like having 4 children. You've got a conservative, a liberal, a libertarian, and a communist, and you basically spend the whole day making them get along. It's this wonderfully broad tapestry of a broad community internally. So far, I have never had a single negative incident with any gun rights group ever. The first time I did a pride parade, I was this close from calling the cops.
What happened there?
Lindsay's mom showed up to my booth and started asking why the enemy was at Pride. For those of you who don't know, this is a rather rabid anti-gunner who, tragically, her daughter was a victim of a domestic homicide, and she has taken it upon herself to punish all firearms owners in Canada till the end of time for a murder they didn't commit.
So what would you like to see change with our firearms laws?
I would like to see the culture within the police and the Firearms Center understanding that self-defense with a firearm is not a bad thing. It's not the end of the universe. I'd like to see a measure of concealed carry as a possibility, not just a paper concept that only exists as a special privilege for judges or retired undercover cops.
Yeah, no, it's difficult sometimes when you get into discussions with people who are, in some cases, quite broadly wrong on key facts, and
It's
then, you know, but they don't want to learn. They don't want to, you know, they don't want to discuss the actual what's going on there, and so
it,
they insist that, you know, their understanding, which might be terribly wrong, is just as good.
I know black people who've had more luck converting Klans members than I have with some anti-gunners. And some of those people, I'm not even talking like Wendy Sukiers, Natalie Provost, Christina Massey's. I'm talking about people who've never had a real negative experience with a firearm and grew up in rural Ontario. Just they just don't know they don't know the laws. They don't want to know the laws. They don't want to know the facts, and they like being afraid. They like being terrified. I want to know at what point, according to the Supreme Court, the firearms laws in Canada will be too abusive.
It's a difficult situation we face as gun owners in terms of getting any sort of recognition of where we sit. But
like when you're looking at booking a flight to Mars for the possibility of working on projects that, like, in the U.S. they're trying to ban DIY gunsmithing. So some of the projects I've wanted to work on, and in Canada, the move to the U.S. if you don't like it here argument is completely invalid, because in the U.S. it's not like Second Amendment and every anti-gunner has to shut up because well, we have a right to amend it. Well, no gun law in the U.S. has ever been passed as a constitutional amendment, and when you bring this up, watch the anti-gunner's head explode. I was in an argument with an anti-gunner one time, and he was going off on a rant, and like, gun controls are lawful. We can amend a right. And I said, okay, I propose that we amend the definition of cruel and unusual punishment, except in the case of oath breakers who support gun control against their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. And we exclude blood eagling, an oath breaker, from protection from cruel and unusual punishment, and define blood eagling as reasonable, justified, and normal punishment.
In terms of sort of self-defense, things have been changing, I think, in hopefully a better way for the LGBT community. But what are the, is the LGBT community still under sort of the same kind of threat? Because as an outsider, I'm not, I don't really know necessarily. So what sort of violence is the LGBT community facing these days?
You still get your bottom of the barrel, sub 50 IQ moron who thinks he can just walk up to someone and hurt them. It does happen. It will probably happen forever, and I would love to see a day where that will never happen. A 1 in 20 chance of getting shot when you do that to a member of the LGBT. I think, based on a body of evidence that I have read over the years, would be somewhat more effective than any criminal punishment, because the guy's going to hurt a human being. I highly doubt he's worried about jail time. But I do believe that worrying about a couple ounces of lead in his chest might actually dissuade him. What you're starting to see is, if someone does really want to hurt someone who's in the LGBT community, they're going to use things like red flag laws. If they're going to do it, they're going to be careful, sophisticated, conniving, and scheming. The spray painting your garage door, blah blah blah, F you, blah blah blah, F word, blah 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 blah. That's not really. I mean, we live in an era where anyone can buy a 1 by 1 by 1 cube that direct streams video to a cloud that you can't, even if you burn down the house, well, it's on a cloud server at Amazon's headquarters now. So home security and surveillance are just far through the roof. So you're not going to see as much of that. And as judges more and more are pro-LGBT, you're going to see less violence, but you're not going to see it go away.
People ask me, what's the complicated things about firearms law? And it's like, well, the law is so badly designed because in a lot of places it's very clear that it was designed by people who were only vaguely aware of firearm issues. That you end up with all sorts of things where it's just
the criteria for some of the law was a drunk woman circling things in a copy of Guns and Ammo that scared her. And then that became the legislation.
Yeah, so we get rulings that are inconsistent. We get these, right now I've got this Section 74 battle going on, and it's, it's difficult to see how they get to the interpretations they've got, but that's where we are.
Yeah. And like I said at one point, we had a entire department within the RCMP who was run by a guy who, under oath, has said, well, laws that are easy to understand are a detriment to society. And I'm just like, when that news dropped, I was like, did he actually say that?
Yeah, we don't want people understanding them too easily because then they will get things that comply with the law.
Like, complying with the law is bad?
That one just baffles me. We want to...
how did the judge not say, so you're intentionally making it hard to comply with the law?
Well, I think that case is still on the go, so they'll have to look at that going on, but I'm pretty sure that's going to get quoted in a number of places there. So if I could, I'd try to encourage one here in Edmonton, but I'm probably the wrong guy to start one up here.
If you mentioned having friends in the community, just be like, hey, if you want to do this and you need help, I'll volunteer whenever you call.
Yeah, no,
if there are people in Edmonton hearing this and want to get a chapter started, we'll put my contact information down below, and I'll get you in touch with Aaron Pellet to get a chapter started. I'll do anything I can to help another chapter get going. And like I said, I'd love to have 10 more chapters across Canada.
And you've got the experience to help people out with the early stages, which are of course always the tough part for anything like this.
And coffee. When Pulse happened, when I heard about it the next day, it's just like, okay, where's the coffee? Where's the booze? I know the previous director, coordinator, at the time the title was first speaker, her wife wakes her up, hands her a cup of coffee, says, drink this, you're going to need it. And that was an incident. There was one range in Texas, and they had I'm going to use the word queer because LGBTQ, it's a tongue twister, but they had one queer employee at the store and they said, look, any of your friends want to learn to shoot, bring them by on Saturday. We'll do it. We'll do the classes for free. They'll have to buy ammo, but that's a consumable. Well, by Monday, they were still running these classes and had 4 groups worth of instructors volunteer to come out and help. So one community is completely willing to invite the other one out. But like I've had I've had people get mad at me for art that I purchased that I would have never purchased if I couldn't use it for um, pro gun purposes. Because to purchase it, I had to agree, to get the art commissioned. I had to agree with Oleg Volt's terms of service, and in his terms of service contract for his website, I will not use, reproduce, copy, or recreate any images or material in this website for the purpose of supporting gun control, or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's a summary. And and the person was like, "Well, I don't like it," and it's like, "Well, I'm sorry. Here's terms and conditions of this."
Well, and you can see the art I've got up in the background.
I had a very nicely drawn. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the poster with the two women. That's caused a lot of controversy.
I haven't, but now I'm curious. Maybe we can find that, and I'll try to sort of post it up in the video here if I can.
Yeah, I'll send you some of the. I think I got all the files, but yeah, I had a version of it with two furry tigers, and it was beautiful, and I used it to advertise a LGBT range day, and the artist just like after not answering a single email in like 3 years.
Got real interested in replying?
No, worse. She doesn't reply. Doesn't message me saying, "Hey, could you take this down?" Contacts the instructor on Twitter screaming that I have stolen my property and am using it without permission.
Oh. Well, that gets into the whole mess of copyright and moral rights and so forth, which is
and if she'd have politely like responded to one email and said, "I'm not sure," but to ignore someone and not have any contact with them for years, and rather than contacting them quietly, to falsely accuse them of stealing. This is the kind of thing. And the funny thing is, it took a year to find an artist who would take the commission because of Oleg Volt's terms of service. Because every artist I contacted, when I said, "By the way, because of the source material, you need to be okay with this," every other one had refused. So it's like.
Yeah, no, it gets complicated for sure.
No offense, but I hate lawyers.
Gibbs
has a very good Gibbs has a very good rule: never involve lawyers.
The thing is that when you need a lawyer, there's not really a substitute.
Yeah.
But arranging your life to need lawyers as little as possible is probably a sensible.
Like the fact that we have an entire community of Canadian citizens who need effectively swatting and false criminal accusation insurance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've had thoughts of, how do you, if this goes through, how do you tell the police or maybe the courts, "Hey, I might be subject to false complaints"? Is there a way to? So.
Well, here's the thing: most police departments don't even consider swatting a problem. I mean, you saw the incident with the stormtrooper out west.
Oh yes, that's actually not too far from here.
As soon as she started crying, any sane, reasonable person would be going, "Wait a minute, what's going on?"
Well,
any intelligent person who said, I would have said, "Okay, can you like point that in a safe direction and hand it to me? Okay, why are you holding this dressed like a stormtrooper?"
I kind of feel like when you got somebody who's clearly in a costume, that one was not a super hard problem. right? It's like,
And like, does every police department now need a safety brief for May the 4th? Don't beat up stormtrooper cosplayers.
yeah, it's like, it's Halloween. There's a guy dressed in a mask. Well, no kidding. You know,
Oh, it's Halloween. There's someone dressed up like a commando.
yeah,
How tall are they? About 3 feet. Are they holding a bag? Yeah. Okay, we'll send an officer.
yeah,
Hey, Johnson. Yeah. Can you get the bag of candy and go hand it out to this kid? Bye.
yeah. No, it's
I mean,
there's now always warnings about, don't carry anything that might look like a weapon, and I'm like, when I was a kid, I remember how like trick or treating with a plastic sword, and now I'm wondering if you wouldn't get tackled for it.
Yeah, I've gone to masquerade events with replica with a VFC MP5 and a full SAS getup. Not a good idea to wear all that stuff in an environment that's meant for people, that's temperature controlled to be comfortable for a woman in panties. You'll drink lots of water by the end of the night.
Yeah, no, that well, and especially once you get all sorts of people into a tight space dancing, the temperature goes up from there. So
oh yeah, but it, I I'm scared that that all this stuff is just going to make it harder to get new people to come out into the sport and the hobby. And there's recreational shooting, there's competition, there's collecting, there's a maker aspect from the 3D printed stuff to like real old school traditional black powder gunsmithing. And there's people who, for fun, will build their own brown vests. Mm-hmm. There's people like there's so many one things, and I've met so many wonderful people. For a while, I did sort of put the chapter to sleep, but in the last 4 years, some of the nicest people I've met have been in the firearms community, and I've never met a truly bad person who was a ardent RKBA supporter. The worst people I've known were either FUDs, the kind of people that say, oh, you only need a bolt action, you don't need a semi-auto, and anti-gunners. Bar none, the worst people I've ever met were that's how you would describe them.
Yeah.
Because the thing that most people won't realize is that most people who are extreme gun rights activists believe in relatively libertarian principles, of which homophobia and a lot of vile cultural tendencies are completely at odds with. Like, you can't believe in not forcing your will on someone else and then believe someone that is a bad person who needs your will forced on them if they date the wrong person. You know if you understand where I'm going.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying there. It's and I think there is a sort of strong live and let live sentiment within the within the gun community. There's people doing cowboy action shooting, and I've never tried that. I don't know if it's my thing, but
that looks fun.
It does. I mean,
the static bent style of match. But if I was visiting Arizona for a couple months, I'd definitely go to In Range's two gun action, and one of the days I would totally bring an old Colt Peacemaker and lever action and shoot a match. That actually looks like a lot of fun to try and to go through a dynamic range with those kinds of firearms. Some of the cowboy action stuff, it looks like a lot of fun. And the fun part of it, you get to dress up. But
that some of the people there have got some really amazing costumes, I gotta say.
And some of the skill level is just amazing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's everybody sees the movies and you know, sees whatever, you know, John Wick or whatever, and they think, oh yeah, that's not that hard. And then you actually, you know, get a gun in your hand and you realize that it's going to be really difficult to, you know, put rounds on target, to operate the, you know, the firearm, you know, competently under stress when you need to, you know.
And then you have police officers in Canada who can't hit the broadside of a fire station.
Well, that's possibly for the best. That could have gotten much worse if they.
Oh, it was bad either way.
Yeah, no, that and
like
the lack of really good answers on that one is.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, they should have lost their gun privileges until they, at the very least, the fact that they missed by 45 degrees.
Yeah, that's some remedial training time.
Both ways. A 90-degree wedge of fire. Were they suppressing an entire town? Like, at what, in what world is that reasonable measured use of force? And it's like, when that all happened, my PR guy yelled at me, but I posted a graphic, and it was, hey, RCMP, one of the principal fundamentals of firearm safety is to identify what you're shooting at. I had a image of of someone in an RCMP costume and a fire truck, and it was, which one might be an RCMP impersonator? If you failed this, turn in your firearm. You need more training.
Yeah, well, I think they said that they saw somebody in a high-vis vest, and that was what concerned them. And I'm just like, well,
at a fire station?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen? There's marine proof and firefighter proof.
Yeah.
Scarily, Marines are considered more intelligent and delicate with their equipment. And most of their gear is high-vis. They saw someone at a fire station looking like they possibly should be at a fire station and opened fire in a 90-degree cone. Yeah.
And when you think, you know, you're responsible for every bullet you fire, you know, you should at least know how many, you know, and a better idea of where they're going.
Like, if they'd have peppered one door, that would have been at least, you could say they were competent with their firearm. They missed the bits, multiple shots missed the building on both sides of it in a 90-degree cone of fire.
Yeah.
Hip firing with my eyes closed, I could probably manage with a gun I've never fired before, maybe 5 degrees. How do you that badly miss that badly?
I have no idea. That's a difficult difficult thing there.
And who the fudge signed off on that guy's certs? What on earth is their certification progress? Hit the berm?
Part of the problem is just you know, a lack of funding for training. I've talked to police officers who say that the number of rounds they get for training in a year, and then I'm like, well, that's less than I spent on a range night. So it's
I mean, last time I went to the range, I probably went through 150 rounds, and that was just 22 shooting pistol.
Well, and I think that perhaps they should do more training with 22 as well, just to,
Yep.
because you can train with small calibers. It's
Honestly, one of the things I like that SIG has done is when they released the M17, released concurrently with it was a licensed 6mm airsoft version and a pellet version. And there's a package, comes with 2 magazines for the 9mm and 2 magazines for the 6mm, and both guns. So you buy, if you're buying it for an apartment, you buy 1 or 2 of these, and at the back of the office, you can have a training area. In a police station, it might not be the best training, but I guarantee you a bucket of BBs is a lot cheaper than a box of 9mm.
Yep.
And with some, like, E-Bike has a digital target system for under, like, $500, I think it was. And it's like an impact sensing screen, video screen, and set that up down a laneway in the back of the office. Voila, you've got a training area. And with airsoft, as long as you make sure that no one accidentally uses their service weapon, it's perfectly safe. And you know, as if you're doing 2 magazines of airsoft every day, that's a lot better. That's brilliantly better than some departments are doing.
Yeah, more training, I think, is always a good, good thing there. So,
yeah. So.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you. It's
likewise. Hopefully, in the near future, the lockdowns will be lifted, and
one of these days I am planning on making a trek out to Toronto as soon as, plagues are done and all of that. And there's a whole lot of people on my list to visit.
I definitely...
I will drop you a line.
I was literally planning pub nights when the news came that, yeah, we're locking down. And it's like, well, there goes all this for a year. This year rolls around, well, still on hold.
Well, that hopefully soon things get a little less locked down, because I will tell you, I'm getting a little tired of the stuff that I'm not doing.
Yeah,
I guess is the.
Oh yeah, it's been a bit of an honor to be your first interview. I hope I did a good job.
Well, I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna have to go through it. and figure it all out myself, because first interview, so I'm gonna have to spend some time at the editing table and all of that. But I kind of had you guys on my radar as like.
I'm surprised you didn't contact us sooner.
I kind of figured early on, when I'm like, hey, I'm at 1,000 subscribers, I thought I'd send you a message and you'd be like, who's this guy? No, thank you. So no, I was glad when you when I reached out and you were like, hey, yeah, no, we're interested, because I also know that you guys are a group that has to be careful of your PR as well, because you got the anti-gunners who are. I think you're one of those groups that really offends them, partially because you don't meet their expectations, right?
Oh, like 2 weeks ago, was it? 3 weeks ago, I had an incident, and and some anti-gunner was defending Bill Blair, and I'm like, wait a minute. You're claiming you're being an ally. You're attacking me. You're attacking us. And you're telling us that we don't exist and we're not really who we represent ourselves as because we don't exist? We don't fit your reality? Because not wanting violence to be visited upon myself and being a part of the queer community is completely impossible?
people have stereotypes about various groups, and they get upset when they're not true.
It goes back to, this is my religion. I don't want to learn facts. I want to hate gun owners. I'm a bit animated, as you can notice.
Oh, good.
But it goes into that they don't want to see a firearms owner as the doorman at the local Lgbt bar, the friendly lawyer that helps people who are in a bad situation, the ER doctor who's been struggling through COVID, the fluffy bunny grandma who works as a public support worker. Like, I have one friend, and she's literally a gun-toting, bunny-loving hippie. And when she's swearing at some of these anti-gun politicians, it's like, wow, you've really screwed up.
There's a lot of I think there's a lot of actually sort of the more down-to-earth hippie types.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a fair number of them who are interested in firearms and in hunting.
They're a useful tool, especially if you have to put a hole in something 20 yards or more away from where you're sitting.
Yeah, well, if you go into rural BC, you'll find a lot of sort of the sometimes the sort of hippie-ish farmers who recognize that sometimes, the coyote isn't going to just decide to to leave your animals alone. Sometimes it needs to be encouraged.
Yep, that happened in North Oshawa number of years ago, back when I was 18. There was a lot of development in the north part of Whitby, and that disturbed a lot of the coyote and coyote wolf populations, and 2 sheep farmers were decimated. And within a year, one of the things that people noticed is they'd actually, this might just be hunters being superstitious, but they'd actually basically figured out what the zoning was, because they were sticking to areas where you couldn't legally shoot them.
Oh, they learn.
Incredibly intelligent animals. And vicious. Yep.
They just learn, nothing bad has ever happened to us here, so this is the place where we'll go.
Wiley went over there, and Wiley's no longer with us. Let's not go there. But yeah, it's like, for a farmer, like a 22, a shotgun, and probably a 223 or a 204. If you don't have one, you probably should want to go pick one up, because like, no matter what, if you're running on a farm, there's going to be threats to your livestock. There's going to be threats to your crops. Gophers, groundhogs, not just the predators. I mean, if you get a groundhog infestation in your field, you might not have a harvest. I mean, if you're a horse rancher, well, $2,000 horse becomes a couple 100 pounds of glue from a 2-pound animal.
Yeah.
If you have a racehorse and it gets a broken leg, that animal's done. Like, you can breed it, but if you pay for a thoroughbred, don't even get to race it, and it ends up with a broken leg, that's a massive investment lost.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, people say, oh, you have insurance. Well, insurance probably doesn't cover that sort of thing. And
$2,000 is cheap for a horse. You can pay 30, 40 grand for Friesians or thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
Beautiful animals, but expensive.
Oh, I am.
A little rat can effectively kill that animal. It's a mobility kill, but it can't work it, can't race it. You can breed it, but if we're talking racehorses, if it hasn't if it's not a champion, its value goes down, and if it can't race, you never could race. Well, there goes your money. So, like, to say that a firearm isn't a valid tool that like the other thing that really spooks me is when you had a member of parliament say that no legitimate hunter is ever going to be affected by this bill. 2 days later, Jim Shockey was showing several of his guns there. And when I say several of his guns, we're talking a guy who is the muzzle loading face of muzzle loading, and several of his guns get banned. Still there? Your mic's not on.
Sorry, I accidentally hit the mute there. Yeah, no, it's well, and
So
it's
is Jim not a legitimate hunter in the public safety minister's eyes?
well, I mean, that's the thing is, a lot of the muzzle loading firearms are going to be covered by this. A lot of, I mean, depending on interpretation, and this is going to be something for the courts to get sorted. But 12 gauges might be covered.
I'm sorry, the parliament should not be saying things like, "Oh, well, the courts will figure it out."
Yeah, no, they should be designing their laws a little better than that.
Like, that's how you ruin lives. And I'm like, you know how expensive a legal firearms case can be. So now we have millions of Canadians who are randomly at risk of some police officer who's bad with a ruler deciding they have an illegal firearm.
Yeah, it's
not how our system should be working. I mean, it doesn't just affect hunters. I mean, is there an exemption for industrial shotguns that kiln that because like St. Mary's cement plant?
Yep.
Is the industrial shotgun they use to clean the kilns? Is that exempt?
It'll be a real interesting question.
Is there a special use exemption for industrial applications? Oh, anything that's what did he say? We're only banning weapons of war that have no legitimate use. I had a stroke. I'm a drunk. But how is an industrial shotgun not a legitimate use? It's literally used for an industrial purpose.
Well, that's the thing is, whenever they come up with these rules, they fail to properly talk to all the people who really might be, affected by it. And, it ends up causing these problems.
Oh, absolutely. And as you said, there's happy scotch, there's sad scotch, and what the fuck scotch.
Yep, scotch is really good for that because you can,
and
it'll solve whatever you need to there.
Yep, I have to say I've liked this grants that I picked up for this to have. I don't know what you're drinking, but
this is the last of a bottle of Aaron 10-year. A friend of mine got it for me, and it's been good stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got another one lined up once this one's done, but this is the last of this bottle.
But yeah, definitely if you're in the GTA and lockdowns are open, I'll show you where to get the cheapest booze in the Durham region.
Sounds good. And I don't know how far you guys have to drive to get to a range, but
if I'm, like I said, I'm lucky that I'm in Durham in Oshawa because I could hit up game units. Assuming I could get a membership or fucking event. If you're downtown, you're coming from basically Union Station all the way out to Oshawa to get to some of the closest ranges. There's one or two ranges within city limits, and they've permanently closed memberships because no one's quitting. It's a engineered desert, effectively. Like, keep in mind, Hart House and Union Station pistol clubs, they were They were Olympic training facilities for members of our Olympic team. When Hart House closed, and then immediately the city closed any range they ran, one of the things that was discussed, and one of the people that spoke out, was an Olympic pistol shooter. And like how, like, our Olympic athletes can't train? It's a stain on the university to have a medal-winning Olympic athlete using their facilities, a facility that has never had an incident on or off campus with any of their members in its entirety, in the entire, in the college's entire existence.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a firearms incident with any of the members of the Hart House Club. But it's a shame. It's just fucking ridiculous. I'm trying not to swear, but it's ridiculous.
Well, and it's funny because the GTA, they keep banning, you know, more and more, what do you call it? More and more sort of legitimate firearm use in Toronto, and it has no effect at all on the illegitimate firearm use. Like, just none.
Like, since Hart House is closed, gang violence has gotten more frequent and more violent.
Yeah,
it's almost like they're not targeting the actual problem. And like, I just watched that documentary CTV did, and I feel horrible for people like Evelyn Fox, who are ignored in the debate because, well, their solution to the problem isn't a gun ban on civilian owners who abide by the laws.
Oh, for sure. It's they need to realize that at some point the strategies they're trying are not the ones that work. And, you know, it would be nice if some of the more effective strategies were implemented, but
I'll say what I said in my stakeholder letter. It doesn't, a new gun ban is not policy that Canada needs. We have, like, I think, and keep in mind, this was like 2001 to probably around 2004, actually. And I did the math on a shooting. I looked at all of the laws. There was a shooting at a nightclub, and I looked at all the laws that the guy broke. And the getaway driver was looking at 64 years. If there was no, I know you're against minimums, and honestly, you made a really good argument. But when a gang member can't get more than like 18 years, and they've broken enough laws, not even being the guy that pulls the trigger, to go to jail theoretically for 64 years, what's adding another 10 years worth of prison sentences that he'll never see gonna accomplish?
Well, and ultimately, I think that a lot of this, you know, you take a gang member off the street, but if the circumstances that created that gang member still exist, then you're just creating a space that somebody else will step in. And, you know, so long as there's this mass, you know, we've basically taken a really highly profitable area of the market and set it aside entirely for bad people.
Well,
and then we're surprised that people are willing to
carry a firearm in Canada unless you're a criminal, basically.
Yep.
And
or a politician, but there might be some overlap. But
but like, let's look at society in general. The majority of firearms permit holders are not criminals. law-abiding citizens. I know several of them who are in the medical field to some degree. Are you telling me that an ER doc, if you gave him a concealed carry permit, is going to be suddenly a danger to society because he has a piece of paper that says he can do something legally?
It's
there, and there's not a lot of data for Canada, but in multiple incidents in the U.S., there have been cops pinned down who are alive today because a concealed carry holder happened on the scene and provided cover and assistance to that officer.
Yep.
Oftentimes being more accurate because that guy doesn't have to beg for ammunition to go to the range. He just has to convince his wife that he didn't spend as much as he told her she did.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the people I know, the people I run into at the range are people who are entirely,
The only thing they have in common is they enjoy shooting firearms.
Yep, but I mean,
it is it's literally the broadest.
But I've, a lot of the most responsible and, so forth that I encounter are people at the range.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and what's, I know, like a lot of the FUDs I know, they might practice, and some of them might be fairly proficient. I've had guys fall over drunk, complaining, like, why would you buy a 223 to practice? All you need a year is a box of shells. One box of shells every 20 years. It's all you need. And I'm like, you're falling down drunk and you're making this argument. I've gone out to the gravel pit with you when you bought your 44. I hit the target more times than you did. I shot it twice. But some of those reckless people, like I said, some of the most reckless people are not members of the CCFR, are not members of the CSSI, not members of CASD, or members of CNFA, or Pink Pistols. It's the FUD. I mean, and who are the ones that Bill Blair promotes and praises all the time? The FUDs that support his gun ban.
Oh, of course, they.
But I said in my stakeholder engagement, like, this doesn't feel like legitimate policy. This feels like Bill Blair is choosing only the policies that explicitly hurt his opponent's political supporters. And really, if you look at what they're doing, nothing makes sense until you look at, well, does this affect liberal voters or conservative voters? Or independent voters? That's the only metric that is consistent with the policies being chosen and the effects they have. Coincidence? But that's what it really feels like. I don't know if you agree with that, because I know some former liberals and New Democrats and large swath, but it really seems more hurt the political opponent rather than make Canada safer. And we know that this Parliament will tell a lie, keep telling it, they'll make it their talking point until people believe it. I'm sorry if I've been ranting and rambling.
Oh, no worries.
This turned into a 2-hour.
Well, I'm gonna have to do some, editing down for conciseness. But as I said, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I will. I think I need to hassle. I'm trying to get a hold of the CFO. I'm trying to confirm that they've their current policies on building DIY firearms. because they keep changing those policies. So that's something I'm trying to.
I'm sure it's one of those things, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't need to hire a lawyer to know how to comply with the law, and I shouldn't have to file a Supreme Court case to figure out what's legal.
Well, and 3D printing has very much gotten them worried. So
it's scary. Someone might print a pink lock.
Yeah, well, they're worried that somebody's going to print, you know, a one of these firearms, and that'll, you know, that's got them worried. So,
or it's not even a legitimate worry. If you know anything about firearms design, you know that well before the investment of a 3D printer, you're making a machine gun. And if you don't know that, you're not educated enough to be making policy decisions on law. And if someone disagrees with me, I'm sorry, they're not educated enough to make a policy decision on law. Sorry, but it's amazingly. It's a good thing the sky isn't falling, because they'd have a heart attack. But it's been fun to sit and chat with you. And
absolutely, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to make this happen, you know, actually in person, because
we'll put holes in things.
Toronto is on my list of places to visit, so at some point I'm gonna have to book, you know, like a week or something, and just check in with all the people I know out there. And
yeah, like I said, I'm eagerly waiting for restrictions to be restricted and lifted enough just to do a pub night and get back to trying to do range days.
Well, assuming the pub nights are open to sort of random drop-ins, I would love to drop in on one of those and just say hi to people.
The official policy that my higher ups, everyone is welcome. The only way you can be barred from being involved with the Pink Pistols is you're homophobe and you don't believe gays have a right to defend themselves with a firearm. So,
my belief is everyone's got a right to defend themselves, and most especially people in the LGBT community tend to have more reason to need to, because it's not been super common that anyone's wanted to attack me for just, you know, who I am or how I look or who I choose to, you know, be in a relationship with. But
yeah, and
you know,
like that's one of the things that came up with the Heller decision. So that's probably, there's better people to interview for that story.
Fair enough. Well, I will let you go at this point. I'm going to have to.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for being on here. I'm going to, this is my first time doing an interview here, so I'll have to kind of figure things out. Thank you for watching. I hope this has provided some insight into a group that's out there fighting hard for both equality and for firearm rights. They also help illustrate the connection that's often been seen historically between bigotry and gun control. Because if there's a small marginalized group and you want to do them harm, often taking away their means of self-defense is a pivotal way that people accomplish this. So there's a reason why a lot of gun control has been aimed in the States, particularly at Black people. In Canada, there was a lot of that connected with anti-Asian sentiment. These things have quite often been paired. As George Orwell says, firearms provide give claws to the weak. They provide a means for vulnerable groups to defend themselves against perhaps a hostile majority. And I think it's important to recognize those issues and to provide support for groups like the Pink Pistols. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like this video, please share it with your friends, please subscribe to see more content. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters. At the $50 level, Jonathan Wheeler, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Firearms Association, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, Ivo Nedev, the CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Matt Ward, Mark Whittington, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, and Andrew Elsich. I also want to thank everyone at the $10 level who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge, and see you next time.